Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Jeep Grand Cherokee car. Today we present you with another large SUV, which this time can be safely called an off-road vehicle. Is it worth buying a Jeep like the Grand Cherokee with a 3-liter diesel engine? The car's class was thus raised, or, according to the other half of Jeep enthusiasts, it was lowered to the rank of an SUV. In reality, the Jeep was supposed to compete with rivals such as the BMW X5, Volvo XC90, Volkswagen Touareg or Mercedes ML, and not the Nissan Patrol or Toyota Land Cruiser, while maintaining the typical, red, very good off-road properties for Jeep. Americans knew perfectly well that the future lies in the SUV class. Structurally, the Jeep Grand Cherokee can be an SUV or an off-road vehicle. How is that possible? The basic version sold in the United States had only rear-wheel drive. It was combined with a 3.7-liter gasoline engine. It is difficult to call such a car anything other than an SUV. And the same can be said about the version with the Quadra-Track iDrive, which, although it offered 4-wheel drive with an asymmetric differential, did not have a reduction gear. You will recognize such a car primarily by the lack of appropriate buttons on the center console near the gear mode selector that engages the reduction gear. In the Quadra-Track 2 and Quadra-Drive 2 versions, you will find 4 WD low and N buttons there. The first drive offers automatically engaged front using an electronically controlled clutch. Quadra-Drive 2 is already a gearbox with a central differential mechanism, the locking of which is handled by an electronically controlled multi-plate clutch. Such clutches also lock the axial differentials, and after engaging the 2.72 1 reduction gear, the central differential is permanently locked. How to tell the two versions apart? On the gearbox console, you will find a plate with the inscription Quadra-Drive 2. If it is not there, you are probably dealing with Quadra-Track 2. Which drive version is better? In principle, for road riding or light off-road riding, it doesn't matter. The multi-plate clutch can be permanently locked, so the QT2 will cope with most obstacles. However, for off-road riding, the QD2 is definitely better. The only thing is that you have to be careful when driving off-road. Yes, the Grand Cherokee is a capable car, but it is suspended quite low and can easily be hung on its belly or damaged. In addition, its high curb weight can quickly bury the car in the sand. In theory, the model described is an excellent car for fighting off-road. In practice, it is average at best. The suspension is as off-road as most of the Jeep Grand Cherokee's rivals at the time, also in the pure off-road class. Cars like the Toyota Land Cruiser had already switched to mixed suspension much earlier. The same thing happened to the Jeep. The rigid axle remained at the rear, suspended on 4 longitudinal rods. The front suspension is an exact copy of the design of the smaller Cherokee, where it debuted earlier. There are 2 transverse wishbones for each wheel. Springing is provided by coil springs. The steering gear was also new, rack and pinion for the first time. All this was to improve driving characteristics on the road and worsen behavior and resistance off-road. Finally, it is worth adding that the Jeep Grand Cherokee of this generation was a technical twin of another Jeep, the rarely seen Commander XK, produced in the same period. The Commander is a larger, more angular and also more practical car. It not only has a larger trunk, but can also carry 7 passengers. Engines. It works perfectly when powered by gas. It is also much better suited for towing trailers. However, for the most demanding users, an even larger and more powerful 5.7 Hemi engine has been provided. It generates 326 HP and 500 Nm and also works well with gas installations, which are basically a necessity in our economic climate. For Europeans, but also for Americans, the 3.0 CRD diesel from Mercedes has been prepared. It is the successor to the recently described 2.7 CDI engine, which powered both the Mercedes ML and the earlier generation Jeep Grand Cherokee. Here we already have a V6 system. The engine generates 218 HP and 510 Nm, so it has the right parameters for a heavy Grand, and with fuel consumption of 10 to 12 L, 100 kilometers, it is also economical enough. We will describe this engine in more detail later. Interestingly, diesel-powered Jeeps were manufactured in the Magnus Steyr factory in Graz, Austria. All engines were coupled with two types of 5-speed automatic transmissions. The smaller ones were coupled with the W5A580 transmission, while the V8 with the 545 RFE. They have exactly the same functions, and differ mainly in the gear ratios. A slightly different version of the Grand Cherokee is the SRT8 model, powered by a 426 horsepower 6.1-liter Hemi. This is a sporty version that has a completely different character than the others and was intended to compete with the AMG versions of Mercedes or M-Power BMW. What's broken? For example, in the front suspension, you need to look at the rubber elements more often and adjust the alignment, and the rack and pinion steering gear will catch the play more quickly. However, it is not bad. This mainly applies to worn-out or frequently off-road vehicles. In such vehicles, you also need to check the technical condition of the cushion holding the front differential. If you want the Grand Cherokee to drive confidently on asphalt, you need to control the play in the rear suspension, especially the elements cooperating with the Panhard rod. It is worth paying attention to the quality of the brake discs installed in the front axle. If they are weak, they will wear out very quickly. Electrics and electronics also cause some problems. Starters and electronic gas pedals are prone to failure. It also happens, and relatively often, that gearboxes require software updates. In addition, gearboxes working with V8s wear out faster, and specifically the torque converter. However, much depends on the method of use. The problems of the drive system include sometimes faulty motors controlling the operation of the reduction gear and sensors activating the interaxle locks. Quite often, minor faults appear in equipment elements such as air conditioning, window controllers, or heating mats in the seats. The 3.0 CRD engine is the well-known Mercedes 3.0 CDI Ohm 642 power unit, which debuted in 2005 to replace the 5-cylinder 2.7-liter. It is worth noting, however, that this engine in the Jeep differs slightly from the same one installed in the Mercedes, at least in some of the equipment elements. Unfortunately, it suffers from the same problems. These are primarily Bosch piezo injectors that wear out relatively quickly and don't always make it to 200,000 kilometers. Unfortunately, they are not very repairable, and new ones cost upwards of $250. Let me remind you that there are 6 of them. Another problem, as is the case with most modern diesels, are the flaps controlling the length of the intake manifold channels. When more carbon deposits accumulate in them, they start to block the flaps. This results in the failure of the control mechanism. Repair is not really an option, and a new manifold costs $500. Remember, there are 2 of them. The preventive measure is treating the engine harshly. Not all the time, but from time to time. To put it colloquially, you have to chase it. Those who chase their Jeeps off-road have no problem. Here, on the other hand, there is a high risk of damaging the engine by taking in water. Water also damages electronics. Unfortunately, this is not the end of the problems. The next one is the turbocharger. Oil leaks occur quite quickly, and the blade geometry control system also tends to refuse to cooperate. Dynamic driving also helps with this, as it cleans the compressor of carbon deposits. In turn, turbocharger leaks must be responded to quickly, because the dripping oil hits the motor controlling the aforementioned flaps in the intake manifold. The motor in such a bath quickly fails. Although Jeeps have a DPF filter, it is a fairly simple design that can be easily regenerated, replaced relatively cheaply, or easily removed if necessary. You just have to remember that simple designs require greater vigilance. If the soot burning process is not completed several times, the engine oil will be diluted to the point that it will rub the drive unit. And there may be no message on the dashboard about the filter failure. This must be remembered in connection with the amount of oil that lubricates the engine. This is less than 10 liters of the agent, which can even mix with several liters of diesel fuel. The smallest engine problems include the EGR valve and timing chain. The first element wears out like in any other diesel engine, while the second one does not wear out for a long time, but it is worth checking its condition after a mileage of over 200,000 kilometers and preferably after 1 or 2 engine oil changes. If it wears out, it must be replaced. Finally, it is worth mentioning the interior, which was assembled from typically American materials, but quite solidly, which means that after years it is not too bad, although the upholstery often requires minor repairs. Even 10-year-old cars look quite aesthetically pleasing. When buying, it is worth checking whether all the car's equipment, including the radio and air conditioning, is working. It is also worth taking a good look at the bottom of the car, because in many copies corrosion begins to appear, which progresses quickly, and I remind you that the car has no frame. Operating costs will be similar to those of competitors, although Jeep parts are often much cheaper than Mitsubishi or Toyota parts. There is no shortage of replacements and accessories. You can even make a Grand Cherokee into a cross-country vehicle with a very wide range of tuning parts. You just need a thick wallet. Basically, there are no things that would be missing for this model. It is worth servicing the car in specialized Jeep workshops that offer their own spare parts, proven and well calculated. It's hard to answer this question, because a lot depends on your attitude. In general, the Jeep Grand Cherokee WK is a very average car, and if you're looking for a spacious off-roader, the rare Commander might be a better choice. The Grand Cherokee with a V8 engine is definitely a good car, reliable, but also gas-guzzling. You need to have money for fuel. On the other hand, if you decide on a diesel, you need to have money for potential repairs. The truth is, however, that even Toyotas have expensive breakdowns. If you are looking for a solid off-roader, it is better to choose an older Grand WJ and spend the excess money on its improvement or buy a Toyota Land Cruiser. If you are looking for a nice SUV, it is better to choose, for example, the Volvo XC90. Something in between? The Volkswagen Touareg may be a better car than the Grand. Despite this, there is definitely more to say in favor of the Jeep than in favor of the Mercedes ML described a week ago, and a much better opinion than of the Range Rover. In addition, there is the legend of the Jeep brand and huge possibilities of modification. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.